Hi. Have you ever wondered what the abbreviation OT stands for? I'm not talking about operating theatre, although OTs might find themselves working in operating theatre from time to time. I'm not talking about other topic either, even though that's something that you might see in an OT post or a question posed in a certain group. What I'm talking about is occupational therapy. Hi, this is Shoshana Shear. I'm an occupational therapist, an artist, and an author. And in today's video, I thought I'd share a couple of ideas related to the profession of occupational therapy and what it is. I had a look at a couple of other videos that are out there, and I wanted to add a little bit of something different, clarify one or two points from those videos that I've seen so far. Of course, I haven't watched all of the videos. What I would like to do, I thought I would do something a little bit fun and to pose a couple of questions and then see what we can do to answer those questions. If you have any other questions that you'd like answered, please put a question in the comment section below this video and I'd be happy to take a look. And I'll be giving you some other ideas as to how you can find out more about this vast profession if you're interested. So the first thing is occupational therapy. Is that a profession that is only for children? Is it a profession that's only for the elderly? What ages does it help? Well, occupational therapy actually covers or assists people at all stages of the life cycle, which is the way that I like to put it, because it's easy to be able to consider the progression of life and the changes that take place in our daily needs, in our life roles, in the types of occupations that we're involved in. If we think of it as a continuum, as an unfolding story, if you will. So we as occupational therapists do help all different ages, and that would fit into the whole entire life cycle, as I've mentioned in a book that I wrote on the topic. We'll come to that in a little bit. The next question that I want to ask and answer is occupational therapy only focused on rehabilitation, and would that be only physical rehabilitation? And the answer to both of those is no. Occupational therapy is a lot more than that. You might see some colleagues of mine mentioning that we help people if they've had an accident or if they've had an injury, if they've come into hospital, perhaps they have a chronic illness or they have a debilitating illness. Those might be times that an occupational therapist would be called in to help to assist somebody to be able to function more effectively, to start to have a look at whether they need to relearn different ways of doing things so that they're learning how to, for example, principles of back protection, which helps them to look after their back so that they're not going to injure themselves again. But we actually don't wait until somebody has had an accident or an injury. Occupational therapy is actually involved in helping our clients from the whole area of prevention and promotion of health, and helping to maintain as active a lifestyle as possible. So we don't wait until there is an injury. We also assist in educating as to what could be done in order to prevent an injury from happening. Of course, accidents and injuries are not the only types of situations that might call for an occupational therapist to be involved. There's a fascinating, relatively new role that's been developed through the World Federation of Occupational Therapists, which looks at the effects of natural disasters. There are other disasters as well, but natural disasters predominantly, and how that affects somebody's ability. If somebody's actually been completely healthy, they've been earning well, they've had perhaps owned a home, and yet they could have their life completely fall to pieces and be in a tremendously difficult situation if a natural disaster suddenly takes place. It could be a hurricane, could be a tornado, it could be a flood. All of these could be a reason as to why somebody might end up changing location, moving to a different area because they've had to evacuate the place where they've been living. And that can have all sorts of ripple effects. Somebody who had a home, now they don't have a home. Somebody who perhaps had a house fire. So once again, we don't wait until there is a disaster. We also do what we can to help to prevent a house fire, to prevent situations taking place. We're also involved in the planning that takes place to make sure that the shelters that are available for those people who go to a shelter at the time of a natural disaster, that those shelters are equipped to the various needs of the different types of abilities that people might have who are needing to go and use the services of a shelter at the time of a natural disaster. So as you can see, there are many different ways and many different times in which an occupational therapist might be involved. What about if we look at whether occupational therapists are only positioned in a school setting, or perhaps only in a hospital setting? Actually, I let the cat out of the bag. I was going to say whether occupational therapists only assist our clients if they're situated in a hospital setting. And the answer to that, as I preempted myself and I started saying if they're only found in a school setting, yes, we do work with people in the school system. We don't only work in hospitals and schools. You'll find occupational therapists in many other settings as well. And that comes to the next question that we can pose and we can answer, is where would you find an occupational therapist? Well, actually, you might find an occupational therapist in an insurance company doing disability evaluations. You might find them in medico-legal setting doing evaluations to help the doctors and the lawyers to be able to come up to quantify what kinds of disability a person has had if they've had an accident, or perhaps they've developed some kind of an illness due to a work setting, the kind of environment that was available in which the person was working, the kinds of materials that were used that might have caused somebody to have an injury. And all of that needs quantifiable data, which is something that an occupational therapist has the ability, the skills and the evaluations to be able to do all of those evaluations and put it into very specific data that can then be used by the lawyers in medico-legal claims. Where else might you find an occupational therapist? We've already mentioned hospitals, and we've mentioned just briefly touched on the whole idea of the school setting. You might also find an occupational therapist actually in somewhere like an old-aged home or a retirement village, perhaps an orphanage. There are all sorts of reasons as to why somebody who's in an orphanage or a children's home might need occupational therapy. Those are just a few of the ideas. Actually, occupational therapists have skills that could be used in other settings also. You'll find us developing our own businesses. As I mentioned in a previous video, that I'm developing my own online store. And you'll find other occupational therapists also either involved in setting up an online store or a store that's perhaps in person. We might be involved in the designing and the manufacturing to a certain extent of assisted devices or of various materials, various pieces of equipment that are used in occupational therapy. We might be involved in designing and devising, setting up certain evaluations, perhaps doing the research that's involved. There are all sorts of ways in which occupational therapists are involved. This brings me to the next question, which would be, do occupational therapists only work with the physical, in physical rehabilitation? We mentioned already in the hospital setting. And of course, there are hospitals that are not only for somebody who has a physical ailment. There are psychiatric institutions, mental health facilities, and here you might find an occupational therapist as well. Unfortunately, there's much lower percentage of occupational therapists going into mental health, but that is a very huge area and a very important area of occupational therapy. So what is it that we do in occupational therapy? If we're involved in prevention, if we're concerned about promoting health, if we're interested in health and wellness, if we're looking at life roles, what could it be that a person is needing to do with their daily life, and how can they be able to achieve their goals? Well, an occupational therapist has a very interesting role to play, because to a certain extent we're a jack of all trades, to a certain extent we wear many hats. I like to summarize it to a certain extent in as I've put onto my mug, and you'll see the image coming on one of my mugs, you'll see the image coming up on the screen now, is Heal Your Life the OT Way through meaningful occupation. And if we break that down a little bit, it really explains a tremendous amount about the profession. So if we take it one step back to the name of the profession, therapy, occupational therapy, and occupation are two words that are brought together for the profession of occupational therapy, for the label or the title that's used. And really that it sums up everything that we do, because we're using occupations or activities or tasks as a medium of therapy. And that could be that we're using them, that we might get somebody involved in doing pottery or doing gardening or in the kitchen or at the desk, or having a look at the layout, the ergonomics related to their desk to help to prevent any kind of a work injury, or to look at whether we need to adapt the method in which a person is carrying out a specific task. Do they need prompts, like, for example, if somebody has a memory problem, do they need some prompt cards to help them? Do they need to be able to start to use some applications on the cell phone to assist them if they have some kind of cognitive difficulty? Do they need to have some safety precautions involved? So would they need any kind of apparatus or equipment in their home, whether it's grab rails, whether it's a raised toilet seat, whether it's looking at certain steps in the kitchen, or a long-handled reach to be able to get to items that are beyond their reach, if somebody's in a wheelchair, or if somebody's short, or if somebody has difficulty bending. All of these things are reasons as to why somebody might need to be able to have some assistance in reaching something that's out of their reach. Do they have a visual problem, in which case we might look at other things like their ability to understand and to remember and to know the layout and organize their space and environment so that they can lay their hands on where items are. This comes to even things as basic as, if somebody has a visual problem, do they need to have some kind of a tactile something sewn into their garments to help them to be able to differentiate different colors? These are all very practical ways, and it comes all into the tasks. The occupation in this instance would be enabling somebody to do their dressing or to organize their wardrobe. It's not so easy to organize a wardrobe if you don't know what the colors are. And that is not necessarily somebody who's totally blind or somebody who has a visual problem, but it could be somebody who's colorblind and needs some assistance with knowing how to differentiate the different colors. So as you can see, there are all sorts of different ways as to how we as occupational therapists will assist our clients to be as independent as possible. And we're looking at independence not just in terms of mobility, as the physios would do, but in terms of being able to carry out those tasks, those occupations, those jobs, those activities that are meaningful to the person, or are expected of them, or are required of them. This comes again, I mentioned the term life roles, and that comes again to our area of life, the life roles, the roles that we're involved in, which happen quite naturally. You're born into a family, and so by being born into a family, you have the role of being a baby, and there are certain tasks that a baby does. You're a child, you're a sibling to somebody, you're going to be a student to somebody as you grow and you develop a little bit more. You're a patient to the nurse who might be involved in the baby wellness clinic. As you can see, that even just being born into the world, you immediately start to have certain roles. Of course, if there's a new baby that comes into a family, there's going to be a mother and a father, so they'll have the role of parent. And with each of these roles, we can go on to many, many different life roles. And with each of these roles, there are certain tasks that are expected of one. For a baby, they need to start to learn their basic development. They're not just really learning, it's something that happens quite naturally, but as a parent or a family member or a teacher, you're going to need to learn what is necessary to know in order to guide that baby, to assist that baby, to know what is necessary. It could be in learning what kinds of toys are appropriate for them, what kinds of foods, at what stages that are appropriate, what kinds of clothing would be most suitable. What do you do if a baby is a fussy baby? What do you do if a baby is, perhaps they start to display certain sensory difficulties? They might be startled when there's a loud noise. They might smile at one parent before the other parent. Usually that's the case. With all of these situations, the parent would need to know how to handle, how to assist their baby to develop to the optimum. And that's going to guide the baby and enable the baby to be ready as they progress through their life, to be ready to be able to go to preschool and then to go to school. And there's certain milestones that they need to reach at every stage. Of course, we all have milestones. It's not only a baby who's needing to reach a milestone. Even if we're going to be writing an article, we also break that down into milestones. So there are all sorts of different ways and times that we're setting goals and ways that we can quantify and be able to reach those goals. So that's already covered a lot more than I wanted to share, or that I considered sharing. I thought I would do just a 2-minute video, and it's a little bit more detailed. With that, I'll leave you with 2 opportunities for you if you're interested in knowing more about the profession of occupational therapy. Of course, there are other YouTube videos that are out, and there are other websites that you can explore and you can visit. The 2 things that I would offer to you if you're interested in knowing more. The first is that you can buy my book, which is up on Amazon. You'll find it in a number of other bookstores as well. And that gives you a lot more information about the profession of occupational therapy, what it is that we do. If you have any questions, you're welcome to post a question onto the comments of this website, of this YouTube video. And I'll be happy to either prepare another video to answer the question, or you might find those questions coming up into another book of mine. The next thing I would offer for you is that you can subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I hope to be able to bring out some other videos. And stay tuned for my next book that's coming out, because it also has some more ideas about occupational therapy, although that's not all that it's about. If you'd like to subscribe to my newsletter, I am starting to bring out some newsletters that have a little bit more ideas of what you can do in a little bit more creative of a way to use your profession. I have more interesting videos coming up, so stay tuned, and I invite you to sign up, click the bell, the alarm on this video, where you can see the next video that comes out. You can let me know what other topics you're interested in. So Shoshana Shear from Jerusalem, and I look forward to seeing you in another video.